You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. Edward.
Yes.
I've made a major decision here on this show, and I just want to make sure that I convey it to you and all the listeners. I've made the decision now that I will only be referred to as Chris, Newts, DJ Newts, Lanooters, Rudy Tooty, Fresh and Fruity Lanuti, any variation on my name, but you just don't call me Lanuti because you don't know me like that.
Whatever, Lanuti.
That thing going on right now between Barstool and the Score. That's amazing.
It's really the sports story this town needs. Otherwise, all we have are mincing Jerry Reinsdorf's words or everybody in full bore panic mode that Caleb Williams is really Mitch Trubisky, who was really Rex Grossman.
Oh, that's crazy.
Really,
that's crazy. Anybody who's upset with a guy over his rookie performance, at least he didn't look bad like the other rookie did. Did he do something stupid like Levis did where he throws the backhand underhand thing out to the sideline where there's nobody standing there? Like, at least he looked like a guy who has some intelligence and IQ out there. The rest of it will come together. Calm down. It was his first game.
I know.
This episode of Sox in the Basement brought to you by Cork and Carry at the Park in the shadow of the ballpark at 33rd and Princeton. I'm going to be there on Sunday, pre-gaming with the boys. I think I'm actually bringing both of them. I originally got, I'm going to do something I didn't want to do, Ed. I originally got 2 free tickets because the little guy, I think it was they said it was perfect attendance, but I don't remember him not missing a day. I'm sure he missed a few. I think they just had extra Sox tickets to give out at the school. And they're like, just get rid of these things. And he ended up with a pair. So I'm using them finally, the Sunday game, because, I think he gets to run around the bases and stuff like that. So that's something to do. But my intention was not to spend any money on tickets for the rest of the year. And now Dominic's looking at me, the 16-year-old, and he's like, you're leaving me behind to go to a Sox game? I'm like, all right, you're coming. I'm just going to go to the window, though, and buy the cheapest ticket. That's how you buy tickets at this point. Don't buy them online and have to pay the Ticketmaster fees. Just walk up to the window. There's plenty of seats. The last time I went to a game, I walked up to the window and I said, I just want your cheapest seat. And the guy's like, $10. I'm like, all right. And that was it. You try to buy the cheapest seat online with all the fees and everything that runs through it, you're almost paying $20. Just walk to the window, be old school. In fact, I'm going to be so old school, I'm paying in cash. Not even using I'm just going to walk up.
Wow. Not even going to pay interest on spending money on Jerry.
I'm not even doing the credit card fee. I'm just dropping 10 crisp ones there. That way I can lay them out. Not one bill. I'm doing 10 crisp ones is what I'm going to do.
Not going to pay in all pennies just out of spite.
But the only guy that gets hurt by that is the window guy. Like, that's the thing. I'm not mad at the people that work on the front lines for the team, right? Like, if you're not in charge of something down there and you're just a guy in the ticket window, or you're the guy that calls up and says, hey, would you like to have season tickets? And people laugh at you and hang up the phone. I feel bad for you. All right. Like, I don't want to hurt those people. But I'm going to try to spend the minimum amount of money. So what I'm really going to do is pregame and get them fed at Cork and Carry at the Park at 33rd and Princeton because the food's great. The staff's friendly. They love it when you bring the family in. They love it when you bring the kids in before the game. Indoor, outdoor seating. It's always fun after the game as well. That's a day game. I feel like if I come out of that game with the boys and I head back over there, the 16-year-old's going to have to take me home. So I'll probably only be there pregame. But if you're around and you see my ugly mug, come over and say hi. See more at corkandcarry.com. All right, let's read
the official Jerry statement,
which is amazing.
Which, by the way, I will preface this by saying, if Chris Getz had said this the other day, I would have had less of an issue with what has gone on. But let's read this because it is amazing.
Well, it's amazing because it's the same thing he said last year. Remember, last year was the most painful season he ever had, and then he did nothing. He didn't invest any money. He hired internally, and he got a worse season. So here's the thing. As I read this, know that I don't believe one word out of this lying, miserly billionaire's mouth. I don't believe a thing. All right? Just like I don't believe he really wants to win. I believe David Sampson, who was on this show, remember the former exec, he didn't say it here originally, but he came on the show. He confirmed it with us, had a long conversation with us when it happened, and that story broke that Jerry Reinsdorf had told him it's better to finish in second place. I believe him. And Jerry Reinsdorf has done nothing over the last 40 years to make me doubt it. He's just continued to back up that feeling. But here's a statement. Everyone in this organization is extremely unhappy with the results of this season. That goes without saying. This year has been very painful for all, especially our fans. I guarantee somebody had to mention the fans. Like, he probably wrote this and somebody said, Jerry, say something about the fans. He was like, right. Those peons? You tell the unwashed masses I don't care. Jerry, we got to put it in there.
Jerry, they're the ones who spend the money. Jerry, the unwashed peons are where we get the cash.
He didn't even write this in my mind. Like, I don't think he wrote this. No, he didn't write this.
If this was something that he had actually said, there was an opportunity for him to just go on video. I mean, release a video, right? And just sit there and say on the social media account, "Hi, this is Jerry Reinsdorf. This season has been nobody in the organization is happy with. We're all extremely unhappy, and we got a lot of work to do. Blah blah blah." You know.
I don't think he writes this. This is like Reifert writes this, his communications guy, or maybe Boyer writes it, or somebody writes it. Okay, and then they come to him and they're like, "We'd like to send this out and put your name on it." Here's the line that drives me nuts. We did not arrive here overnight, and solutions won't happen overnight either. That one sentence bothers me the most because you're right, we didn't arrive here overnight, but the reason that we arrived here is because you enabled Kenny Williams, Rick Hahn, and all of these other glad-handing yes men that surround you. You enabled them for so many years that you drove the organization in the ground. In fact, the first half of that sentence, "We did not arrive here overnight," is an indictment on you, Jerry Reinsdorf, as an owner, because you got to be bad at your job. You got to be bad at what you're doing. You got to be bad at how you run an organization to drive it into the ground as deep as you have over so many years to get to this point. Like this, you're right. This doesn't happen overnight. This is incompetence for decades. This is like a slow death that's been going on. I still point to the fact you were middle of the road payroll in 2005. You caught lightning in a bottle. I'm sure if you sat there and framed the fall of the Reinsdorf White Sox, it starts in the 80s. There's mistake after mistake after mistake. There's gaffe after gaffe. You had an opportunity probably to win the World Series in 94, and you were the owner in the front leading us to the end of that season. You were the guy in the forefront of it. I blame you amongst others, but you heavily sit in that strike season. I remember it. You denied your fan base and you denied all of baseball something that would have been amazing. Sox Expos World Series. It was happening. It was happening.
Unless you ask Yankees fans, in which case.
But nobody cares what they think.
But the Yankees were going to play the Yankees for the World Series that year, according to Yankees
That's
fans.
what happens. The Yankees play the Yankees in the World Series. It's their birthright. That's how they feel.
But that line is exactly what I'm talking about when I say if Chris Getz says that, we didn't get here overnight and we're not going to be able to turn this around overnight. I can sit there and say, okay, you know what? Fair point to Getz because he's just sitting there saying, I got a lot of cleaning up to do from the previous regime, even though I was part of it.
Yeah, and look who owns the team. That you can even throw that in
look who owns the team. Right. And he's pointing fingers. But for Jerry to say it, you're right, it rings so absolutely hollow because it's like, we didn't get here overnight. No kidding, but you've been the owner for 40 years. So it's on you.
Now, the second half of that sentence is equally awful. Solutions won't happen overnight either. Hold on a second. Didn't you forego an outside search for a general manager and somebody to build your baseball team because Chris Getz getting in there was going to make the solutions come quicker? Like he wouldn't have to spend a year evaluating, which is all he really did this year. Like, is that?
Yes.
Are you kidding me? I mean, like when he speaks, he thinks we are stupid. Like, honestly, folks, any of you that are out there, and I get people that do this all the time, they'll be in the comments. Jerry Reinsdorf's a great man. Jerry Reinsdorf, is a successful owner. You guys are too hard on Jerry Reinsdorf. Now, these are probably all people that are loyal to Jerry Reinsdorf, or it's Jerry just sitting up there in the dark with a little, give me my little tweet machine. And he sits there and he just kind of fires things off at the podcast underneath different names. I imagine him doing that. Maybe he really
and
is.
I also imagine, like when you said that they brought in this statement for him to read, and I imagine him just putting his cigar out on it as his signature that it's okay.
And the one guy looks at the other guy and goes, "We have another copy of that, right?" Yeah, we got another copy. He likes to put it. Yeah. He likes to put his cigar out in the things we bring him. Anyway,
that's a good thing. But that's a good thing.
The solutions won't happen overnight either. Guess what, Sox fans? This guy has no intention of making this any better.
Yeah, he's not going to spend the money.
Sox in the Basement listeners, for exterior windows, doors, patio doors, and storm doors, look no further than Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. No high-pressure sales. They don't come to you. You go to them. Why? When a windows salesman shows up at your door, he's got like some crappy little dingy example that he wants to show you, and then it's hard to get him out of the house because he wants you to agree to the sale right then and there. You go to Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest, everything's there, full-sized. Nothing's a picture in a sales book that you have to imagine. The owner's in showroom, there's one on site, they use all their own installers, they never farm out the work. 40 years in Oak Forest since 1985 with all major brands custom made, no stock items for a perfect fit. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest, a half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street, windowdooroakforest.com. I don't want to spend the whole show yelling about Jerry Reinsdorf. I know he doesn't care about me, so I really shouldn't care about him. But you can't ignore this.
He's going to continue to do what he's been trying to do for 40 years, which is not spend like a major market franchise owner, not spend like a man of his wealth, and not prioritize putting a good product on the field, because there is one way to turn this around overnight. You know,
spend money. Spend money. You spend money. Like you can go out right now and buy. You can go out right now and buy a team and not even be at the top of the payroll. You can just go out and buy a few guys and at least be a team that sits at around 500 and it's enjoyable baseball. Which that's what he wants. He needs to be better. See, that's the thing. That's what confuses me about the statement, Ed. What confuses me about the statement, because it makes me feel like he will not be spending anything. The Moncada money that's coming off the books, the Eloy money that's off the books, things like the Clevenger money, like all this money that's off the books. It makes me feel like he's not going to even let Getz use that. And that's a mistake. That would be like saying, I want to be worse next year, because it isn't going to get any better. What he needs to do is at least have a team that's worth watching. You would think that he would invest some of the money. And it gets me to this fear. It gets me into this fear that I'm dealing with the real life owner that from the movie Major League, that just wants the entire fan base to leave him so he can go to Major League Baseball and say, nobody in Chicago likes the White Sox. It's clearly a one-team town, and I need to leave. And because if he doesn't put anything back in, it's not going to get any better. And the line that comes next, going back to last year, we've made difficult decisions and changes to begin building a foundation for future success. There you go, building a foundation. That's what people say when they're like, this is going to take a long time. We got to get the foundation built first. We got to work on the minor leagues. We got to get our minor league system ready. Then in a couple of years, we'll start looking at the major league section of this team. While we're doing that, though, invest your money in this team. It's almost like he's out there telling you to buy war bonds. You know, the only way we can come to victory here is if you give us your money, and then I'm going to invest it. And I promise you, this time around, I won't waste it. After we've watched him do this before. Remember the last rebuild, where the money was going to be spent? And then Bryce Harper was out there and you didn't spend the money? Remember that? You offered less guaranteed money to Manny Machado and then tried to lie to us and said you gave more? The way that you wrote the contract was like the last $80 million of that deal was only if you wanted him when he was at the end of his career in his late 30s. Everybody knew you weren't picking up those years, and so did Manny. So you undercut all the free agents after you said you were going to spend the money. We already fell for this nonsense. Nobody's falling for it again. He can't believe that people are going to fall for it again. And that's what makes me, like right now, start to think to myself, maybe he really doesn't want any of us to watch. Maybe he really wants to drive it in the ground for some reason, which is a strange maneuver. I mean, think of the gamble he's taking at 88 years old and how long it would take to drive a team into the ground, get Major League Baseball, let him move it, and actually reap the rewards of that later. He wouldn't. He'd be dead by then. Rebuilding your minor league system, that's cyclical. There's always going to be periods of time where your minor league system it's the pits, because it happens, okay? And in the White Sox case, unfortunately, it happens more often than not because they've had terrible scouting. I mean, and you can come after me in comments or whatever, but you cannot deny that they have not really had impact players come up through their minor league system, come up through the international system. And I don't want to hear about Luis Robert Jr.'s potential. I want to hear what he's done, okay? We were told Oscar Colas was going to make a major impact, and I know he hasn't been given as much of a chance as maybe you'd like, but he didn't come up and make a major impact right away. He didn't force the hand. Yoki Cespedes didn't do anything. We were told all about how the younger brother of a Major League All-Star was going to be even better, and we've never seen him in a White Sox uniform.
let alone making an impact. And the draft picks, I mean, Andrew Vaughn has not made an impact. Gavin Sheets hasn't made an impact. They're players. They're guys that are on the major league roster. Maybe they can have a better season, but scouting is a huge problem. And if Jerry had invested in scouting, okay, this whole time, he could get away with low payrolls because you can find players that fit the bill. You can find players that are going to succeed in your system. You can find players that are going to do what you want them to do from the perspective of what the manager expects from them on the field. You can find diamonds in the rough in the draft and internationally. But the other way to go about it is for Jerry just to spend money on a payroll and just have a top half payroll every year is not a difficult ask for a guy in the third biggest market in the country.
Who's worth $4 billion, according to Forbes. And he's not the only owner. He's the majority owner. There's lots of money that's available to be invested in this team. And the way that they run it in the ground, Major League Baseball should be looking at him. This is the problem. The problem is the lack of accountability, the cartel that is Major League Baseball, and the way that, this is allowed to happen. This would never be allowed to happen anywhere else. I don't think NFL owners would allow this.
In the NFL, there's a minimum you have to spend, right? You have to field a relatively veteran squad. You cannot just go out and find scabs and rookies and just suck for draft picks for that long. I mean, you can, but they do have it built in where you have to spend a certain amount of money and you're going to get a certain amount of talent for that. Major League Baseball doesn't have that. We don't have a salary cap and we don't have a floor. And as a result, that's why Major League Baseball has teams, and that's why, when the Players Association was going after the latest bargaining agreement, CBA, they wanted to make sure that this whole idea of teams that weren't going to pay players and teams that were going to tank year in and year out didn't exist. What I'm wondering if Major League Baseball has to look at is how much of the corporate entity that is the White Sox ownership group, how much is it built around maximizing the investment of all of these owners, maximizing the investment of all of these shareholders, and not putting enough of it back into the team? And is there something that they need to do? Because an individual owner, I think if it's just Jerry, okay, and he's beholden to nobody else, there's maybe an easier path for him to sit there and say, fiddlesticks, I'll do this. Okay, I'm going to give Jerry a slight benefit of the doubt in this conversation. It's going to infuriate you and a bunch of other people.
I'm already angry with you because I'm already angry with you because I can see where you're going. I'm already ticked off.
I know you're already ticked off. I can see that you're ticked off at me.
You're making an excuse for the billionaire, and there are no excuses for him because I would immediately, because you're going to say, well, he is beholden to the rest of his board, so he has to do certain things, and this is an easier way for him to meet the goals that he has to do for his board. He has to get them so much profit. So not being good, he's still bringing in, he's not spending money, but he's not losing as much money, and so he can withstand this, and it's okay. But my counter would be everybody would make a lot more money if you were a class organization.
Well, everybody would be, the truth.
If you would have built something like what the Cubs did when the Ricketses come in and they just change what's going on, or many of these other baseball franchises that are out there. Okay. And you see teams that improve not only what's around their ballpark, but they improve their team. They improve the worth of their team. All those investors, I'm sure, are smiling ear to ear. So I don't get that. I don't get that argument.
No, and to kill my own argument, it rings hollow because if you look at the Cubs and when they were owned by the Tribune Company, okay, there is a company that definitely has to be beholden, to the K1s that they're going to hand out at the end of the year. And there were times when the Cubs were competitive. Now I know they were the lovable losers and all that stuff, but the fact is that every time you went into a Cubs season, hope sprung eternal. They were the lovable losers for a reason. There's a reason why Cubs fans were so bizarrely optimistic year in and year out. And that had to do with more like what Jerry has said, finish second place, right? There was never this feeling of foreboding like we have right now and even going into this year that there's no way this team is going to be entertaining. There's no way this team is going to be, any good on the field. Nobody could predict historically bad because you can never predict historically bad, but we all knew that this was going to suck. And for Jerry to come out and sit there and say, this is something that didn't happen overnight. Well, yeah, we know, but you haven't been here overnight. You've been here
40 years, 40 plus
years.
Yeah.
And this isn't going to take, overnight to fix it, but yes, it can. I agree. You cannot completely reshape your scouting department. You cannot bring up talent through the minor league system and the international system. and develop
Right,
it.
you're not
overnight.
winning the division next year, but you can start being a better team.
You can win the division next year. He could go out in free agency and spend enough money to put together a team that could compete for the division next year.
Okay, you're actually right. The problem is it's been beaten into our heads as fans for so long that, well, this is what you have to do. You have to tear everything down. You have to lose for a couple of years. You got to build your minor league system, and then you go out there. And I'm sorry, it's just wrong-headed. Okay, Major League Baseball teams can make major changes and can turn around their fortune fairly quickly. It just depends on whether or not the owner wants to invest in it. And you can then build your system, if you're good at your scouting, with picks that are later on in the draft instead of having one of the top 3 or 4 picks. And what's crazy about this one is they're going to pick 10th.
Right.
They're going to pick outside the top 10, right? Isn't that what they're doing? So, I mean, that's what the absurdity of this year is. Look, I want to know what he's going to say, but I hope when he says it, the beat reporters are not only allowed to ask questions, but they're hard on him. At this point, it's time to ask the question, why won't you invest more money? Couldn't you go out in the free agency and spend dollars to become a more competitive team? Why would you not go out and invest the money? Somebody should be sitting there saying, you are estimated to have this worth. Somebody needs to sit down and say, this is what the team could be spending based upon what your revenue was in the last time that you reported gate and all of the other things that you bring in. You own your own media company. You clearly would make more money if you spent money. Why do you still believe, after the last time that this failed, that you want to do the exact same thing and convince people that we should just be bad for a couple of years while we build from the ground up again? Because it didn't work the last time. So why should we even believe that that's the right thing to do? Like, somebody's got to jump on him and ask him the question. On the line with me right now, the Sox nerd, Dave Marin, who puts all those interesting tidbits up on the scoreboard at The Rate. And then he comes on this show each and every week to give us even more. And he's brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore, and we will see you. I will be there in person. Pollyanna Oktoberfest at the Forge in Lamont next Saturday, the 21st. It kicks off at noon. Goes till 10 p.m. Live bands all day long. German food, German music, Sox in the basement. Gonna be an absolute blast. We will see you there. Get more details at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me?
Chris, where are we heading into the weekend? 114 losses? I got nothing, man. Nah, I'm just messing with you. Truth be told, I can't quit the Sox. So with that in mind, a few White Sox did-you-knows past and present. Did you know the White Sox once played a game in Dublin, Ireland? I bring this up on the eve of halfway to St. Patrick's Day at Guaranteed Rate Field. On October 24th, 1924, the White Sox defeated the New York Giants 8-4 at Dublin's Croke Park as part of their second World Tour. Only 20 fans were in attendance because the game conflicted with church services. Did you know Brian Ramos became the 685th player to homer for the White Sox with his first career blast on September 10th. Frank Shugart hit the White Sox first homer on April 29, 1901. I would venture old Frank, who was born 518 days after the end of the Civil War, gets more pub now than he did during his career. Did you know 2024 is just the second time the Sox have used 4 different DHs, DeLoach, Grossman, Pham, and Vargas, out of the leadoff spot? The only other time that happened was in 1978 with Bannister, Garr, Molinaro, and Moore. Speaking of leadoff DHs, did you know the Sox improved to 15-2 all-time when their leadoff DH had at least 2 RBIs in a game? That happened on September 8th when Zach DeLoach accomplished the feat in a 7-2 victory at Boston. The Sox have won 5 in a row under these circumstances since 2007. Did you know the Sox have used a record 62 players this season, blowing by the record of 56 they set last season? The 34 pitchers the Sox have utilized this season are 2 more than the record they set last year, and 1 more. Did you know Paul DeJong of the Royals still leads the White Sox with 18 homers? If Andrews Vaughn or Benintendi don't catch him, DeJong will become the first player not with the Sox at season's end to lead the team in homers since Darren Johnson in 1975. Before I get to my zinger, a reminder, you can access my blog at soxinthebasement.com, and there is plenty of Sox nerd material on Twitter and on the scoreboard at Guaranteed Rate Field. And Baseball Reference got back to me last week and explained that they did indeed change Corey Lee's rookie status recently, which rendered my recent zinger and sweet scoreboard stat on Lee useless. Now my zinger. Last Sunday marked the first time since Game 3 of the 2021 playoffs that the Sox and Bears won on the same day. The Bears hero that day versus the Raiders was Damian Williams, while the Sox hero was, of course, Larry Garcia. That's it, Chris. Probably more than you wanted to know about Frank Shugart, Darren Johnson, the Bears, and Larry Garcia.
Let's talk about Brian Ramos.
Yeah.
Before we get out of here, because I saw this, people are kind of in a tizzy. I think it was suggested that he might get to work out in the outfield or something like that, and people were concerned about whether or not that's a good idea to take a guy who's a third baseman and stick him in the outfield. And
ask Gavin Sheets and Andrew Vaughn about that.
It's probably not. Probably is going to be a disaster. On the other hand, does that even matter? Like I don't believe in Miguel Vargas or Brian Ramos. I don't think either one of them are full-time Major League Baseball players. You're shuffling chairs on the deck of the Titanic with these guys. I don't think you have very many Major League Baseball players on this team. I don't think you have very many guys around that would be real contributors to a team that would have a winning record. That by the time you got to the level that you were a team that won more games than you lost, none of these guys would be on the team. The only real professional baseball players that you probably have on your team, and it's a stretch right now to even say Luis Robert Jr. because he has been so disappointing this year. You brought that up earlier in the show. He's a lot of potential, but what has he done? And I brought up his baseball card basically and said, okay, well, what has he done? I mean, he's a 268 lifetime hitter at this point with a 794 OPS. He's not over the 800 mark. And his OPS plus for his career is 118. I know, yeah, there were a lot of injuries and all that stuff, but when healthy and on the field, he's an above average player. He's not the superstar that was promised.
He's not Mike Trout.
Superstar year, which was in 2023, where he had an upper echelon season where he hits 264 with an 857 OPS and hits 38 home runs. That's a guy who then you could say, okay, he's one of the top 10 outfielders in baseball. That's what that season is. One of the top 10 outfielders in baseball, maybe one of the top 20 hitters. I think he came in 12th in the MVP voting in that season. But if you look at all of his other seasons and what he's done and what he's doing right now this year, I don't like this. Well, he's having a rough time and they're a terrible team. If you're great, be great all the time. Because great players across the spectrum of all sports don't just stop playing. Michael Jordan was a great player even when the Bulls were terrible. And I know the Michael Jordan thing, I just picked like the greatest basketball player ever, and that's kind of unfair, but I'm just trying to make the point. Great players are great no matter what. You don't have a lot of real baseball players on this team. You've got a guy in Benintendi who's a good baseball player, who's got a big chunk of your money. If your owner spent normal, you wouldn't be that concerned about the $15 million a year because you'd have several guys that were making that.
Right.
But he doesn't spend like normal. All right. Yeah, Robert Jr. is still a viable, above average Major League Baseball player at his worst. And sometimes he's really, really good. So he's a baseball player. Again, I don't see how you keep Sheets and Vaughn on your team. They're the same thing. They're both replacement level players. And I can't find any more Major League Baseball players on this team that I'm convinced of being like a real part of this. So I don't care where they move him. Put Corey Lee in center field for all I care, right?
Put Brian Ramos behind the plate.
Yeah, get crazy. I don't care what they all do, because what I really would love to see at the end of the year is just a bloodletting. Like, just start releasing guys. Start over. You got nothing there. And like you said, you can go out right now and not have the highest payroll in baseball. You can just have a reasonable payroll and you can put together a competitive team.
Yeah. Yeah. You are the worst team in Major League history. Nobody has earned a job. No one.
No matter what Chris Getz says. Do you hear him on the broadcast Friday night? Quote, we're not going to be working heavy in free agency. We've got guys on the field right now who just need to improve their game. A lot of young players who just need to make adjustments and be more productive. What a bunch of crap. No, you don't. You got a lot of guys who've been brought up and given opportunities. Miguel Vargas got 81 games with the Dodgers, and you're giving him everyday time now. God, I hope that's not true. Nobody on this team belongs on this team. I don't care. Like, I remember how angry I was with the idea of trading Robert Jr. or moving on from Crochet or any of this stuff. At this point, I don't care. I don't care what happens to any of you. There's a couple of young pitchers I'm really interested in. Like, don't touch Noah Schultz or Hagen Smith or Drew Thorpe. Just leave me those three guys, right? I think that would be silly.
Those three guys in the campfire milkshake. Got it, Lanuti.
Right? No, get rid of that too.
Oh, okay.
That thing is the most disgusting thing. That thing tastes like it's not even real milk. It's gonna come out that they're using chalk to cut cost. And how many people do you think have bitten into that cup?
Oh, a lot of people have bitten that cup.
They put that chocolate around the plastic. How many times do you think that somebody who's drunk bit through the cup and started chewing on plastic? It's gotta happen a lot.
Well,
right?
Like biting into a plastic cup and chewing on the shards is more fun than watching what's on the field.
Joe, what? You can't eat that. Why? There's plastic in there. You're chewing on the cup. That conversation's happened out there.
100%.
At least more than once.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found and always on soxinthebasement.com.